Now I'm going to stop sharing and let you all know that we have a fantastic session for the next 90 minutes. Please enjoy your time with these lovely ladies. I turn it over to you, Mary Ellen and Cheryl.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome everybody. So this should be very fun. So let me see if I can get to where I was before and share my screen. And I think I'm going to play this right away, Cheryl. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, here we go.
Probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means.
Okay, we're going to play that from the beginning. So give me a second here to get it started.
Introduction to poetry. I ask them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say, drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means.
Okay, so I think to model what we're going to do today, we're going to play one more time and then just listen. Let your mind drift as you're listening to what Billy Collins is telling you.
Introduction to poetry. I ask them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say, drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means.
Okay. So Cheryl, that was your selection. Do you want to say like a word or two about that?
Well, one of the reasons that we actually, I'll just in general talk about maybe why we're doing this session and the intertwining of photography and poetry. And one of the reasons that we like the idea of doing this is that both of these media deal with images, and they both can deal with reflection in what you hear or see in both of them. And poetic images in particularly provide just a unique opportunity to get different perspectives, the perspective of the poet and the perspective that you bring to it. And when you're listening to it, it gives you the melody of the words gives you yet a different way of reflecting on the content and images that you hear or that you see. And one of the devices we'll be using is based on Lecto Divino, and I'll go in. It's in your workbook, but it's a way to bring focused attention to the images that you're hearing and seeing in poetry. And so that's kind of the reasons that's kind of the reason and the motivation behind this session, and why we like the idea of combining these two medias of poetry and of photography.
So I come to it from a slightly different perspective. So my hobby, my passion, my kind of thing for life is photography. So I was looking at some photos when I was a kid, and I got my first camera when I was 10. And it was a wonderful Girl Scout version of the old-fashioned brownie camera. And you know, I just love that camera. So the thing that strikes me about photography is that it's all about images as well. And the images can range from the very realistic to the very abstract. And if you follow some of the photographic icons of the past century, they went from realistic depictions to very abstract and metaphoric depictions. And so this would be the work of Alfred Stieglitz and Minor White. And so there's a whole range of photography. So it's not just reality, but it's also getting into images that are metaphoric. And so the blending of these two is such a cool thing, because in poetry, you can have things that are very realistic, and you can also have things that are filled. The whole poem could be based on a metaphor. And so that's why I love the combination of photography and poetry. Anything else that you want to add, Cheryl?
Nope. I'm thinking that maybe we kind of get into the first exercise and do a breakout with everybody. But let me, before we do that, I'm going to share my screen for just a minute. You all should.
Okay, I'm going to stop share then.
Okay, I just wanted to, everybody should be looking at a workbook that's, I know, in the chat, and perhaps you actually got it before the session. Oops. And it, excuse me for just a second.
So you'll notice, as Cheryl's looking for it, that even the workbook is a blend of poetry and photography. And we did that intentionally to kind of put in your mind, or kind of set the stage for you to think about both aspects.
Oops. My desktop is not cooperating. Hold on just a second. So everybody should see a booklet that looks something like this. And actually, if you have this workbook will cover both of the sessions that Mary Ellen and I are doing. This session is the first first session in this series, and then we're asking you to do something in between sessions, and then at the end of CPSI, we'll come back for the second session. In the workbook, you'll find all the poems that we're going to introduce to you today, including the one that was just read by Billy Collins, a brief description of the sessions, and then, like I said, the poems that you'll be reading to one another, and then the prompting questions based on the Lectio Divina that will bring some focused attention to the poetry that you read. And the way that we're going to do this is that we're going to have you break out into breakout sessions, each of 3. Each individual will read the poem once, and the other 2 will listen. And then after each reading, everybody will focus on the first question. So there'll be one reading, and then all of the people in the session should consider and note the feelings that came to mind during the reading of that poetry. Second, there'll be a second reading, and then we'll ask the question and respond to the question. What images are suggested by the poem? And then the third reading will be a response to that third question. And so this is all covered in the workbook, as well as the slides, and the instructions will also be in chat. And I will stop sharing so we can get back to the slides.
Okay, so now I'm going to pick things up, show a portion of my screen, and go to the first breakout session. And oops, I forgot to put the workbook page here. But this is the first poem, One Art. And so exactly what Cheryl mentioned, these questions are to focus your attention. So the key thing is 3 different readings. And I believe Cheryl has instructions in the workbook as far as how to work with within your threesome for those 3 readings. And reading out loud, because the one thing that Cheryl and I noticed as we're working with this is the power of the words heard out loud, especially when read by somebody else. So with that, if we can whisk people away to the first breakout.
Welcome back.
Yes, welcome, welcome. And so we just want to spend a few minutes just kind of talking about the experience and starting out with, as you look through or had the poem read to you, what feelings did come to mind? And we'll just kind of general discussion, just raise your hand. And so Deborah, I saw a hand raised there. So what feelings came to mind?
Well, we talked about catharsis and kind of a buoyant regret. Like it's like this regret, but don't feel so bad about it. You know, like this whole dance between disaster and not so much. I don't want to hog all the answers because there was so much in that poem. So I'm just going to stop there.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share? Walt.
I was angry. I didn't like being told that loss is easy.
Mhm.
And to paraphrase one of my colleagues, what fucking right do you have to tell me that loss is easy?
So I think that's the other thing that's really so interesting about poetry is that there are so many interpretations, probably as many interpretations as there are people who read poetry. And what strikes somebody as a very nice kind of reflection of who they are to somebody else is, man, what's going on here? And so, but that's also why we started out with the question, what feelings came to mind? Because there's all sorts of different feelings and so much depends on what you recently experienced as well. Anything you want to add, Cheryl?
No, I was just curious what other feelings came to mind from other people. Anybody else?
Okay, I wasn't going to share, but because my team knows that I cried almost the whole time, but I had a very deep sadness listening to this, and I lost my mother to Alzheimer's, and it just was remembering all the little things in the beginning that she would lose.
Mm.
And Denise, one of my best friends, lost her mother, not to Alzheimer's, which she was severely in, but to COVID. And just really, really, really tough. And in fact, you know, I was very, very close to her mother as well. And so what you just described is exactly how I felt during one of the readings of the poem. Exactly. You know. Any other? So let's move to the second question. Any images that came to mind?
I'm just going to tag on the first one. We had a total opposite kind of thing in our breakout where we found that the person might have been taking a step back, just trying to feel gratitude. So I'll just put that on the shelf for now. And all 3 of us felt that it was really tough to get images with this poem.
Walt?
I'll go with the loss of the mother's watch. I don't want to beat this with the hose. I just want to say the image of a watch time being lost is a pretty powerful challenge for human beings. We know we're all growing and dying, and that watch being lost is so symbolic to me of time is, we're going to lose time. There's no other way around that.
And anything else?
Well,
Okay, sorry.
oh, it's okay. No, I just thought that, it's the kinds of things that everybody goes through, forgetting things like, where did I put the keys? Where did I leave my glasses? All of those things that everybody does almost habitually, but sometimes you think that it might be a sign of something, and other times it's just you're preoccupied with other things, that you're busy in your day and you just don't realize I took them off wherever, in whichever room, and now I'm somewhere else and I don't know what I did. So the idea of keys and the other thing that struck me is the people, the names, people you might have been best friends with when you were growing up, and you see a picture of them and like, what was their last name again? I don't remember. Or, you might just remember half of it and you lose that.
Mhm. So I'm just going to go to the third question about messages. We already talked about loss. We talked a little bit about gratitude. Any other messages that came across as you heard the poem?
Walt.
Walt?
So I stand back and look at this poet standing back and trying to make meaning out of a painful situation. This person seems to be, the message is try to understand what's happening.
Kelsey?
I had a bit of a different read. I took it a lot lighter when I read it, when I was listening to it, of like, I was like, a Hakuna Matata, like bad things happen, don't worry about it. Like these things keep happening and you can't change them. And like, this is just how it goes. And so I was taking it more from with the message of like, you're going to lose things. It happens. And it's not to be disaster. Like it's just, it is what it is a bad phrase, but I can't think of another phrase for it. It's just like, this happens.
I piggyback off of you, Kelsey, that even the feelings that I had, even though in the moment they were deep, and at the same time it was that combination, dichotomy or pendulum swinging between sadness and hope. And my message was about life moves on. I remember a poem that my aunt used to read about life is a series of losses, and those who grieve well live well. So when you embrace your grief, you carry on and you embrace that loss as you do the joy in your life. So I had the same kind of, yay, okay, there's the other side of loss.
So it was interesting yesterday when Cheryl and I were getting ready for today. And so I'm by my daughter's, so 2,000 miles away from where I normally live. And then in the midst of our working together yesterday, my husband couldn't find his wallet. So we had to take a little break. And, it was kind of important because on Friday we're boarding an airplane to go home. And so he was going through all sorts of things about what he needs to do in order to get his driver's license back. So, there's all sorts of things that you can lose from the mundane to the very, very, very deep emotional. And so what we're going to do next is let you create your own haiku. And so I'm just going to share the screen for a second to set this up for you. And Cheryl and I are going to share two different things with you. And so we're going to set up the haiku. Probably I should show this one first. And so it's really the haiku. We're using like the new standards right now, where it's a 1 to 3 line poem of no more than 17 syllables based on anything that you got out of one art. And so to kind of set this up, because the haiku is always, is so much about the present emotion and what's happening right now. So I'll start this. Heart of a moment. A haiku expresses the heart of a moment in a few brief lines.
Using images and senses, a haiku brings feeling to life.
A haiku is a form of instant communication. In haiku, the experience is shared in a few brief words, offering both the feeling of the moment and the insight that we are not alone.
When the creative spirit speaks, things come into being. Light, sky, earth, seas, plants, the sun and moon, all living creatures, and time itself.
So that's one way to look at a haiku. And we also summarized writing the haiku. So usually 1 to 3 lines, 10 to 17 syllables, usually common everyday events, and bringing up one to all of your senses. Highly suggested it be in the present tense because it's here and now, and express a feeling. And usually there's 2 parts, you know, kind of the intro to, and then something happening.
And one thing we wanted to add as you were working on your haiku in the moment and to stay in the moment is, while there are guidelines to haiku, which we have here, is to stay in the moment and think of it as improvisation on what you just heard. So bring some of those, you know, yes to the moment as you work on your haiku.
And so now I'm going to stop the share, and you have 10 minutes to put together an haiku based on one art. Feel free to turn off your screens while you do this. And then I'm going to set the timer, as well as I'm sure Wing Mike as well. Okay, I believe it's time. And so hopefully everybody got a start to a haiku. And so what we're going to do next is to go back into our same breakout groups and share the haiku that's based on one act, wherever you went with that. And then after you share your haikus in your threesome, if you can talk about what other images came to mind based on the haikus created by your threesome.
And they have about 5 minutes for this, Mary Ellen?
5 minutes for
For this, yeah.
Mhm. Okay, Beth, Beth and Mike, if they can go into the breakouts.
Sure.
And then I'll go to the next breakout too.
Sure.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hello. So I'm curious, during the reading of your haikus, what images came to mind? Were there any new images that came to mind when you shared your haikus with other folks?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about solitude, and if solitude is always negative or also positive sometimes, and maybe that you can embrace solitude in a positive way. So that was more like a different way to look at it, and it opened new doors, I think, for some of us.
Very good, thank you. Any other images that came to mind as you were sharing your haiku? Or enjoying each other's haiku?
Chocolate milk.
Chocolate milk. I like that image.
It's also fleeting.
It's in the moment. Okay.
Should we move on to the next breakout?
Yeah. So we're going to do a very similar exercise to what we did with One Art. This time it's a poem by Mary Oliver, When I'm Out Among the Trees. And so this poem is also in the workbook. The questions are going to be the same or very similar to the first questions, and have one person in your group read the poem, respond to the question, and then have the second person read a poem and respond to the question in order, and take time with each question as you're reading them. Okay? Whoops.
And a reminder, this breakout is also 10 minutes.
Thanks, Cheryl. All right, welcome back, everybody. Everybody back?
Yes, we're all back.
Okay.
All right, we're all back. So we're just going to have a short discussion about this particular poem. And we're just, for the discussion, if we could just focus, because since I'm the photographer, photography is my passion. I'm just really curious what images come to mind as you read through this poem. And Cheryl, I can't see.
I am opening up the different screens. So if you want to just unmute or put it in chat or raise your hand, and I'll. Liz.
Yeah.
Oops. I'm having trouble hearing Liz.
Yeah, I can't hear Liz either.
Okay. Sorry, Liz. Oh, can you write it in chat maybe? And then I think Joette, you raised your hand also.
Oh, no, but of course
No.
I would love to talk.
Sorry, I apologize.
It's just been the most delightfully emotional time for some of us. And the image that comes to mind is one of strength and vulnerability and the importance of both.
Okay. And then I'm you know, what Liz wrote in the chat was a combo of light, leaves, tree branches, and trunks.
And I saw Walt. Walt.
So when I was 8 years old, I believe, I saw The Wizard of Oz, the movie. And the trees. I was most surprised as an 8-year-old that the trees were sentient, that they were wise and they were directive. And people, or at least my experience, we didn't pay attention to trees and that they had anything to say to us. So that image came up in my mind when I read this poem.
Yeah, so there's a couple of additional, go ahead, Cheryl.
In chat, there's the interconnection of trees and the outside world, came from Jane, and some other comments in chat. A combo of light and leaves, that was from Liz. And the poem image that evoked the front cover of the Shel Silverstein book, The Giving Tree. Interesting, very interesting. Any other metaphors or images that came to mind?
Yeah, Yardina just put in garden, the beauty of nature, being one with nature.
And kudos to the Giving Tree, several of you
Yeah.
remember that book.
And just so much that can be done with growth. So much.
So we talked about I would almost say that they saved me, the line, and I am so distant from the hope of myself. And so the feeling that the person is having a struggle or that the trees are far away, aspirational. And then Beth
And
wrote,
from a totally different point of view.
yeah. We have a tree with a tire swing and two that have a hammock on them. So relaxed swinging, a tree thing is a tree thing for me. So it's interesting how one image, how trees just can be different parts of all of our lives. And
Yeah, exactly. So the reason why we're spending time on imagery and metaphors is really to have you start thinking about poems and what images come to mind, both from a realistic all the way to a more metaphoric. And so there's so many things that are happening in the chat right now. So lots of cool things that can come to mind just by thinking more about the images associated with a poem. And so I think we'll move on then. And if people want to post more in the chat about this, we could probably spend an hour and a half just talking about Mary Oliver's poem. And I'm a little biased. It's one of my favorites, so I'm a little biased. So I'm going to move on to the next and our last breakout. And it's, we're going to do things a little bit differently this time. The title of the poem is Two Lives. It's a little bit longer than the other one. So one person will read while the others in the group will take notes specifically about growth and imagery related to growth. And then if you can have a short discussion about how this might be depicted in photos. And so we were going to spend like 10 minutes on that in the breakout. So one person reads, other people take notes, and it should be outlined in your workbook. So welcome back, everybody. And if we could talk a little bit about the imagery associated with this and how the imagery might be related to growth. So, Joette, I'm going to pick on you.
Yeah, what talk about growth. I feel like this is really stretching me. And I was trying to get the images, and then this last one, what a mouthful that was. So just to there were so many things happening all at once. So I was having trouble this whole time with images, which is why I'm feeling stretched. So I thank you for challenging me. And the only images that could come to mind was just a series of different juxtapositions. And then the end, we talked about, well, isn't this what life is all about? Like, who am I today? Or who am I now compared to a half an hour ago? Yeah, that was jam-packed. Thanks for the stretch.
Yeah. So did anybody have any specific images that came to mind? Hey, Walt, unmute yourself though.
B17, very strong image. You know, I was in it. The stacking the paint cans on the loading dock. Wow, what an image. At the end, the walk from his desk to the door, and the should I open that door? So Joette, you know, you asked that question. Should I open this door to stretch, to reconcile? Very strong image for me.
And one of the things that struck me as I first read this poem is just the what if aspect of it. You know, what if you took a slightly different path? What if you opened the door? So the possibilities in the choices that we make. So anybody else?
I have this image of the housing, you know, the handsome houses on the shady street that's quiet and crushingly uneventful. It kind of brings to mind things like that old Alan Sherman song, "A Little House in Levittown," is you know, or the song about the boxes, little boxes, and they all look just the same. And so I get that image of him not being satisfied with, well, it's not being satisfied in that living situation.
Mhm. Mhm. Anybody else? One of the things that struck me about, oh, go ahead, Regina.
So I hope I didn't ruin this for my colleagues in the breakout room. I found him rather annoying because he, you know, to Walt's point, you open up with B-17 in Normandy. This is not, gosh, you know, the path not taken, I could have done this or I could have done that. It's this romanticization of war and suffering. So he imagines that a life of meaning is going to be, you know, single mother and widow and struggle, and he has this fantasy based on a very privileged position that he doesn't seem to appreciate. He just kind of whines about it. So to some degree, it was anti-growth.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective.
Sorry. So,
Well,
but,
no,
I
that's
mean, the end with opening the door, yes, but yeah, and you can love books, and that's, I just didn't see a whole lot of appreciation for his life of the mind.
Mhm.
It's interesting. I think that was interesting is how we imagine ourselves to be. You know, so we have images of what we want to be and images of what we'd rather be, maybe, or images of what, like you said, the path not taken, which of course we didn't use, we pointedly didn't use Robert Frost, but it's the same idea, you know, of images. Any other images for other folks? But yeah, interesting.
Marcia and I were talking about how when crisis happens, normal is appreciated. So we were thinking about how you go through your life and you're irritated by things because and then something horrendous happens and you get through it somehow, and then you get back to sort of more calm and steady existence, and you have this period of appreciation for it because of what you just went through. And then because you're human beings, you get used to that again, and then you get all complaining about that too as time goes by. But it's like this rhythm of ebb and flow. But image wise, I was thinking about the Union. He became a Union official in one of the lives, and so I was thinking about a Union button, and I was thinking about Norma Ray with the sign, and just things like that were definitely loud for me. It was great. Oh, good. I could just spend all day on this.
Yeah, and so a couple people mentioned in chat the movie Sliding Doors from a few years ago, kind of the same concept, going from one life to another life. So for me personally, this is one of those poems that kind of causes you to think about the what if. And so hopefully you can think a little bit more about that. But we want to wind up with going into our summary and then what's happening next. And so what Cheryl and I were trying to do today is really share with you the concept of reading out loud with different focus questions. And reading 3 times, and starting a practice doing that kind of thing. And then thinking about images, both from the poetic perspective, as well as images that can be captured in a photo. And then we also, with the haiku, creating your own poems and your own interpretations. As you saw this afternoon, there's a whole range of interpretations of the same poem. And I think subconsciously, when Cheryl and I were picking poems, we were trying to probe a little bit, or as Joette said, stretch people a little bit while thinking about growth. And so for our next session, we're giving you a choice. The choice is to write your own version of Two Lives. And it could be either as a haiku or free verse. And then either take or find photos that are suggested by your poem that you've created. So you're forming your own two lives. Or you can find or choose a poem that means a lot to you. Or you can look at the workbook, because there were several other poems that Cheryl and I loved, but decided to put them in the workbook. And use the reading out loud with the focus questions. And then write your own version of the poem and find images. Although, as I was thinking today, when I was getting ready for our next session, I actually took the photo first and then used my phone to record a short haiku. So you could use that approach as well. Oh, go ahead, Cheryl.
Oh, I was just gonna say, also, so the images can be literal, they can be metaphorical, they can be anything that you want. You're not tied to. They can be from different perspectives. I just wanted to add that.
And they can be extremely abstract.
Mm-hmm.
Or highly edited using Photoshop or some other program. So, and then, so what we're going to be doing during the next session is sharing your poems and images. We also highly recommend finding a buddy to work with between now and the next session, so that you can actually spend time sharing and reading to each other.
Any questions?
So, and then if English isn't your first language, feel free to write in your native language. So now, any questions? And so we invite you to put in the chat if your intention is to join us in the second session. That will just help us plan our various breakout groups, etc., and the sharing of the poems. So if you could just add that in chat, that would be wonderful. And so our closing is
Introduction to Poetry.
I
asked them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide.
I
say, drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out.
Okay, I'm going to share screen again just a sec. If I can find it.
Introduction to Poetry. I asked them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say, drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. but all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means.
So we thought we'd end with that, kind of give you a sense of what images might be. A little bit more literal there, but feel free to use your creative spirits. And we hope to see you on the 23rd.
Thank you so much, ladies. That was fantastic. And thank you all for joining and participating and sharing and being so open and things I've lost our words, vulnerable. This is ending our first full day of sessions on a great note. It's been fantastic, but wait, there's more. So we would love to see you at these sessions tomorrow: business education, design thinking, from insight to innovation, failing forward faster, withology applied, bringing diversity and inclusion into the design space, and cultivate your curiosity. If you have a teenager in your scope, there is also teen sessions starting tomorrow, 13 to 18. And that's like your legal age, not your mental age. So if you want to register a teen, reach out to Jamie Robinson. She will love to register your teen. Again, thank you so much. Fantastic job, Cheryl and Mary Ellen. You're amazing. And we'll see you all tomorrow.